Well, Rachel, unmuted, welcome. I am so excited to talk. I've looked at your profile a number of different times and we've recently just connected, but I'm so fascinated by your background and how you have become unmuted and really just looking to, hear a little bit more about your journey and about your story.
Yeah, well, I mean, we can kind of start anywhere with that.
And so I read in the very beginning that you kind of felt like you didn't really have a voice in the, kind of earlier part of your life. And so was there one thing that happened for you that allowed you to say, it's time for me to start expressing my opinion, to start, validating my thoughts or, just kind of putting my thoughts out there?
Hmm. Well, I'd say the two things that I muted the most growing up were my emotions, because I was a good kid and so I wanted to act like I was fine. All the, part of
Hmm.
that persona is I'm fine. I'm fine. I can handle it. I'm good. I've got it, which means that when you're really struggling or in pain, you don't really tell people because
Yeah.
that's not what like the good together person does.
Hmm.
So I learned to silence that for a while. And then the other thing that I silenced, and a lot of it was out of fear of rejection. Like, I mean, most of us have some type
Yeah,
of fear, right?
of
Of
course.
like, am I going to be good enough? Are people going to reject me? Are people going to make fun of me? And so for me, even though I loved to sing, I was really terrified, like, to do that in front of people.
Sure.
And so those were two things that growing up I silenced a lot.
Mm.
And part of it was my parents were going through some challenges in their marriage. And so I learned, people internalize dysfunction and crisis in different ways. And
Sure.
my,
Sure.
my brother was like the diffusing bomb in the corner that would just like, act out. And that's how he got attention. And then
Hmm.
I got attention by just being, as I said, being good.
Yeah, yeah. And it's you say that, and that beginning part really resonates with me because I'm a very emotional person. And so I'm a very sensitive individual. And so for most of my life, I didn't really understand it. And
Mm.
so I silenced that part of me. I didn't realize that that was my strength. I didn't realize that that was what gave me, kind of a little bit more validation of kind of who I am. And so once I started to accept that about myself, then I no longer cared about if somebody, was like, oh, you're being sensitive. And it's just like, yeah, well, that's who I am. So that's how I'm going to act. And that's how I'm going to, be. But before that, it was just like, oh, am I being too sensitive? Are these emotions, are these feelings that I have? Should I not have them? You know?
Right. Because they don't get, I mean, especially for men, but they don't get, and men, little boys, they really don't get validated, right? It's like buck up, you know?
Oh yeah, it's just and I've always considered myself like a strong kid. I've always been a big kid, but then here I am, this sensitive person, and my wife will, she laughs sometimes because we're watching commercials and all of a sudden something hits me and she turns around, she's like, are you crying? And I'm just like, well, it was emotional. But
Yes.
when you're 10 and 11 and trying to figure things out, it's hard to understand that. And so I love that you've taken that and really worked to now help people understand that they can, express those emotions and express those feelings. And so how do you do that for folks? Like what's the biggest, kind of reward that you get from kind of some of that transition?
Well, it's interesting. I get a lot of comments. So I'm most active on LinkedIn, right? I share a lot of content on there, a lot of stories, videos, just like personal anecdotes, thoughts about things. And there was a woman yesterday who messaged me and said, I've been following your work. So your posts are like a salve, is the word that she
Mm.
used. And I was like, wow, that's like a really powerful word. And I've had other people say it's like a soothing gut punch. So like you're gonna, I'm like, is that a good thing?
Well,
Like,
sometimes we all need that reality check, but the way that you deliver it isn't so harsh, right?
exactly. Like I'm not somebody who's like in your face. Like that's so not my style. My style is more
Yeah.
like, let me just tell the truth. You may feel a little something, but you're going to end up feeling comforted on the other side of this. And
Yeah.
so for me, a lot of it is sharing my own journey, my own thought journey, my own journey of overcoming struggles, my own journey of still being in. I think we often hear the after story for everybody. We're like, here's the before story, my life sucked. And then here's the after story, and everything's amazing. And what I do is I tell the middle story
Mm.
also.
Well, because we're all in it, like in the things that you probably dealt with, just like anybody who has something or like a trauma or anything that they're dealing with, it's always going to kind of be there, but you learn to manage it, you learn what's best for yourself and how to mitigate that. But it doesn't just because you teach it and coach it doesn't mean that you no longer feel it, you
Right.
know. And I think that that's really what allows for the best coaching is to say, hey, listen, these are honest things that you're working with. These are things that I still work with, but here's how I work through them, and here's
Yes.
how I manage that for myself.
Yeah, like I think it adds to the credibility. I never trust someone who's like, I've figured it out. Here's my 7-step process. Here's all the answers to your problems. I'm like, I do not trust you for a second because that does not hint of any humility. And I think,
Nothing's perfect, right? Like
no.
there is no perfect system, and it's just a matter of constantly working at it, constantly evolving, constantly being a little bit better than you were yesterday.
Yeah. Well, speaking of getting unmuted, I've been asked on podcasts, Rachel, what is your like 4, 3, 5 step process to getting unmuted? And I'm like, I mean, I have things that I guide people through that are reflective and things that I invite them into. I like to invite people. Like my style is
Yeah.
invitation, not a prescription. Like
Yeah.
I'm not a doctor. I invite people to consider, right?
Hmm.
I like to awaken, to activate people. I'm a catalyst, right? And
Exactly.
so it's not my job to tell you, Scott, here are the 3 steps you need to do.
Well, and that's a bit naive to think that if you do these three things, that this is what's going to happen, because everyone's got their own journey. Everyone's going to handle and come into a situation just a little bit differently, so they're going to get just something different out of it. And
Right.
so it is different for everyone, but the process and the way that you work through it is still the same, right? Like so you can kind of move through things, but yet you get to go through your own pace, and what may be challenging for one person is going to be easier for somebody else. So it's just yeah, I'm not a fan of just do this and everything is great. Well,
Right.
it's a constant evolution.
Yeah, like says who. And I mean, I do have certain frameworks in the sense of like
Of
I think
course.
we silence our body. I know you've talked, and I know you have an interest too in around like functional medicine. And I've,
Hmm.
years ago fired all my doctors because of a lifetime of health issues, chronic health issues I had growing up that they weren't listening to me. And so I was muting my things my body needed. And once I got connected to the right healthcare professionals that
Mm.
understood that the body is an interconnected system, I started to get support and my body started to heal and I got off of medications and I stopped having certain chronic issues like bronchitis and ear infections and acid reflux, like things that I
No kidding.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
what was that? And I know that today's medicine is really all about, okay, well, we'll fix this with this, but then that causes something else instead, I'm not one that likes to take medication. I have to take something for my asthma.
Sure.
I've had it since I was 4 and I notice a difference, but if I don't, because believe me, I've tried to get off of it.
Yeah.
And I think that there are some still holistic ways that I haven't really explored to try to do some of that. But so what was some of that like for you? Like, so what was going on for you, and how did you then decide that I don't want to do this anymore? Let me explore something else.
Well, so this will be the unmuting your body portion of our conversation.
Yeah.
I growing up, I had from the time I was 4 years old, I had chronic ear, nose, and throat infections.
Mm.
I had about half a dozen surgeries by the time I was 16. I have currently a gaping, 20 years later, a gaping hole in my left eardrum and about a 60% hearing loss as a result
Oh
of all of the
wow.
infections and scarring. I've just gotten used to like accepting it's normal to me, right? It's we normalize
Sure.
things because we
Yeah.
just I'm used to basically having a 20 to 25% hearing reduction, and
Yeah.
I don't know any different at this
Mm-hmm.
point.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had these chronic infections, and then it was just, here's another antibiotic, here's more amoxicillin. I had so much amoxicillin, the pink bottle, that I actually liked the taste of it, which is not good,
It just
but
speaks to how much you had it.
I had it a lot.
Yeah.
And I had it a lot. And I was sick. I mean, I remember there was one year in school where I had perfect attendance. And I was like, how does this? Because I just never did. I think in third grade, I missed 3 weeks of school for being sick and having infections and having surgeries. And then when I was about 16, 17, I started to develop acid reflux,
Mm.
and didn't know what it was. I was very embarrassed about it. I was like, what is happening? Why is this? Oh, this is gross.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't really say much about it because I was like, well, this is kind of weird.
Mm.
And then eventually the pain was so much that I had to say something and I had to see a doctor. It was really, it was the summer of 2004, and I had gotten really sick with something called Parvo virus, which is something
Mm.
that dogs get, actually. So I don't
Yeah.
even know how I got it, but they tested me for mono 3 times. All came back negative. I just had like intense joint pain. I had immense fatigue. I lost my sense of taste as a result of the medicine that I had to go on.
Oh, wow.
And it was just really bad. And then my
Yeah.
reflux flared big time. And then that's when I started going on medication. So I was 20 years old on acid reflux medication. And I stayed on it for another, 8 years. I guess
Wow.
7, 8 year. Yeah. So 2004, 2013. Yeah. So almost 10 years I was on that medicine. And I was terrified to eat without it. And then something really interesting started to happen. I've always had an interest in health and wellness. And so
Yeah.
in 2007, when I had been out of college for a year, and I started working at a company, an insurance broker that I had been at every summer in college as an intern.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took my degree in psychology, my interest in health and wellness, and I started on this track of corporate wellness. And in 2010, I had come across a group of people that were called health coaches. And we brought them in and we did a program with them. We did a sugar detox, and we had to get rid of, dairy and gluten and corn and soy and processed sugar and, a bunch of other things.
Yeah.
And I remember like how different I started to feel doing this. And I noticed I kind of kept it up for a bit longer. And it was the first winter that I didn't have congestion, like
Mm.
that I could remember.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is that? What is this about? And so a little while after that, in 2012, I went to grad school, and then 2013, I became a health coach, and I was going through these trainings and listening to these people on, teaching about the body and about these holistic approaches to the body and to health issues. And this one guy gets on, and he's an allergy specialist. And he goes, what often starts in colic as a baby progresses into ENT issues as a child, and then digestive issues as an adult. And I'm like, literally,
You're like, what?
I was like, pause, rewind. Are you in my life? Like, what is happening right now?
Yeah.
And so he said, is often a dairy intolerance. And I was like, shut the front door. Like,
Yeah.
I grew up on yogurt. I had ice cream cake every birthday. I had a family size container of Kraft Parmesan cheese in my house at all times.
Mm-hmm.
Like, grilled cheese was the only sandwich I would eat. I was like, I just started to have this moment of how come no one told me this?
Or how come no one thought of it? How come no one said, let's test you for maybe some allergies, maybe some food allergies, maybe think of more about what's happening to you than just let's fix this one thing. And I think that's, doctors get paid to fix you.
Sure.
But shouldn't they also kind of truly look at understanding? And I've had some interesting conversations with some doctors recently who have opened up some direct primary care practices.
Mhm.
And the one thing that this individual, has that you say is that he's really looking, he's like, I could go and make a lot more money, somewhere else. He's like, but I care about what's happening for my patients. And it is, I think that it's a shame that we can't go and have these conversations and understand what's happening. And then for people to say, well, let's just explore this versus just take this prescription.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
And it's like and there's a blend, like
of course.
there's like you said, right? Like I take medicine for my asthma, or like, if I have immense, and we're having real life conversation here. If I have immense cramping, I'm gonna take like some Tylenol. Like I'm
Oh,
doing other things, but I'm like, I'm not gonna sit there and suffer just to be stubborn. Like,
Exactly. So there are things that work, and when I'm feeling pain, I will take some things for that. But for the most part, I really do like to have just that healthy eating. And really what I noticed for me was I had gotten up to a place where for myself, I was unhealthy. I've always been a big guy. I
mhm,
went into my freshman year of high school 6 to 200 pounds, so I was always a big kid. But I had gotten up to about 280, 290 pounds. I was taking care of my mom who had Alzheimer's, and at the end of that journey, I had this like reflection, like, who am I? What do I want? Life is too short. I lost my father early, and then I just lost my mom. And so it's just like, okay. And so I started to notice and I started to think about how I wanted to feel and how I wanted to act. And then I started to just eat accordingly. Well, I didn't like the way that I felt when I ate that big plate of pasta and I had needed to take a nap. So let me not do that and see what happens. And so it was awakening because I really started to kind of pay attention. And so when you're working with people, it must be, for me, it's extremely satisfying when somebody starts to pay attention and somebody starts to implement something. And so how do you work with people? Because I know you do a lot of group work. I know you do a lot of public speaking.
mhm.
Do you also do one-on-one coaching? So how do help people?
Yeah, primarily now it's because of the demand. I mean, it's been great, but a lot of demand on my schedule and time for keynotes, for group workshops, for leadership training, and so a lot of what
Hmm.
I'm doing is in the context of a group setting. So I don't currently really have a lot of time to do one-on-one coaching because it's just it's very time intensive to do that.
It is.
I see that happening at one point, whether it's in the form of like a mastermind or, like a small group coaching cohort that does
Hmm.
something monthly. I see myself creating something like that. But currently it's in the context of these, group experiences that I do with organizations. And it's amazing how by being trained, so I'm a speaker and a facilitator. And so there's an art and science to both of those things.
Yeah, there really are.
And facilitation, really the goal of facilitation is to unlock the collective wisdom and insight of a group. Like it's your job to be the catalyst for
Hmm.
that process to happen, not for you, again, to be prescriptive and tell them what to do. And I was doing a workshop recently, and two things happened. One, there was at the end of the session that I did, I had a call with the company a couple weeks later, and the CEO was like, "So, just an update." And he's a really gregarious guy, cares deeply about his people. It's a good place to work. But he was like, "Somebody put in their notice right after your session." I was
So
like,
could you be good but not so good?
It's like, and she had a lot going on. She's a lot of transitions that she's going through. There's a lot of stress on her plate. I think it just really made her realize that in a significant and just couldn't ignore kind of a way. He's like, so just I just want you to know that the power you have to transform and
Well,
impact people.
Well, and that's actually a good thing for the employer as well. It may seem like a negative, but if she had that much going on where she just needed that little bit to then, not little bit, but she needed that help to kind of understand like, okay, this is a higher priority, then that's a great thing for the company as well, because more than likely she wasn't as present as she needed to be doing that work. So the fact that you're able to unlock these thoughts and to help to people start to facilitate these decisions and think about things, in a greater capacity is just beneficial for everyone involved,
Yeah.
everyone that that person, you know, is involved with.
Well, and the other thing is she was like, I'm really grateful for this. Like she actually acknowledged what it just happened. It was a 45-minute presentation. And she was like, this, like, I appreciate that you brought this to us because like it made me realize that this, and in other cases there's a group I was working with, group of project managers at one of the larger accounting firms, consultancies, and somebody reached out to me after the session I'd done on burnout, beating burnout, because I burned out myself in 2017.
Hmm.
And she reached out and she said, I've already made a huge change in my life. And it was like 48 hours after the session. I was like, what did you do?
Yeah.
And she was like, well, I realized, that my job is split. I'm here in Virginia for part of it, but then I have to travel to, somewhere down south every other week. And it's really taking a toll on me and my son. I'm a single mom, and talked to my partner about it after your session about what I might do. And she said, I went to my boss and I had a conversation to say, like, something needs to change. And so I've been rolled off the traveling part of my work. And now I'm just based here locally. This all happened within a matter of days. And she said, Rachel, I slept better last night than I have in a year.
Mm. Isn't that wonderful? Just to be able to give somebody that power to say, go ask for what think about what you need, and then
Yes.
and then go ask for it. If you have, obviously she has a great employer who said, yeah, we can make that switch, and it doesn't sound like it was a hard switch because it happened that
Yeah.
quick, but we never know what the answer is going to be until we ask. But how many times do people think about what it's going to be or what somebody's going to say,
Mhm.
and then we don't allow ourselves to ask that question because we already know the answer.
Right? That's what muting is, right? So we mute ourselves at work. We're like, "Oh, I'm really struggling, but nobody can know because then they're going to fire me." Or I really need a change to happen because I just am about to crack. But if I do that, then they're going to think I can't handle it. Or like we tell ourselves, or if I ask for that,
I
they're not going to say yes, and you
I
know?
used to do that so much, and so when being in a position with one of the last companies I was working with before I came here was a great insurance company, and I was in charge of all of their specialty divisions. So real niche places of, trying to find people. And I was really only supposed to, probably have 10 to 14 recs at any given point because it was just, there was a lot that went into finding people. And at one point I had gotten up to 21 recs. Um, but I was afraid not afraid because I wanted more for myself.
Yeah.
So because I wanted these different things to achieve, I didn't want to say no because I didn't want to look like I couldn't handle the work that was in front of me. But
Yeah.
really what ends up happening is that I stopped working out because instead of going to the gym at 5 a.m., I would just wake up at 4:30 and just start working
Yeah.
because I had so much to do. And so
Yeah.
I stopped taking care of myself. My stress level went up. And then I was just like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And I had to reel that back in. But there are times that we can let that slip away regardless of how conscious that we're trying to be, and we don't even realize it because we have these insecurities about, like, well, I can't say no, and then
Yeah.
you hear people saying no and you're just like, wow, that's so powerful, I wish I could do that. And you just, yeah, but you have to stick up for yourself because nobody else is going to, especially
Yeah.
in a corporate environment. You have to be able to say, hey, listen, I'll do this, but that's going to take priority over something else, so let's make this decision.
Yes, and what you said there, I think, was really important. Of a let's, like, we're in this together. Let's make this decision. How can we come up with a way that'll work for both of us? Most
Hmm.
people are not going to come back with a response to that question and say, like, suck it up and figure it out. Most people that have any emotional intelligence
Hmm.
are not, and any leadership skill at all, are going to respond to that more so with, yeah, I mean, what do we need to bring somebody else in? Do we need to, if it's a client related thing, do we need to let the client know there's going to be a delay of a day or two of getting this to them? Like, we're
Hmm.
often so afraid. And I was too. I mean, when I burned out and got Epstein-Barr virus, which is an acute form of mono,
Oh, wow.
4 years ago because I just drove myself to the ground.
Yeah.
And I had to send the scary email to our CFO, who was my boss, and the CEO, and to say, look, unchecked, this Epstein-Barr virus can have significant neurological damage. It can lead to things like lymphomas. I mean, I'm like, when a doctor starts to use those words to you, you're like, oh,
Okay.
this is
It's
serious.
time for me to pay attention.
Like, it's unfortunate that it takes such an extreme conversation to realize that you got to change. But I did. And I said, I need help. I
Hmm.
can't keep doing this by myself. I need to scale back. I can't have any meetings until all my meetings have to start 10 a.m. or later. That's not like a comfortable thing to have to say to people, but I was
Hmm.
sleeping 11 or 12 hours a night for months and not feeling rested because
Oh,
it
wow.
that's what mono does to you. Like you
Yeah.
are just wiped. And so I couldn't wake up at 8 o'clock for a meeting and function. And only I knew that.
Hmm.
And I'd been there 10 years, so I did have a bit of a track record and
Yeah.
credibility under my belt, but like at the same time, it was still uncomfortable. And they were very gracious and kind and almost even protective of me. Like, is this too much for you? They started to,
That's good.
be aware of that kind of stuff.
But it's crazy because so I'm 47 and I kind of grew up in this era in this corporate environment where you didn't say these things, you just worked.
Mm,
And it didn't matter if it was 50 hours a week or 60 hours a week, you just did whatever you needed to be able to continue to do the things that you wanted to do. And that was the culture, I think, especially when I talk to, kind of people my age and a little bit older, that it was just you kind of went through this grind. And it's refreshing that people are now like, this is not okay. Like, I need balance in my life in
yeah,
order for everything to really be healthy and functioning the way that it's supposed to. Because if when things are out of balance, um then
yeah,
nothing's really in balance, and um yeah. And
yeah.
so go ahead. So now you've gone through a lot, listening to, as a kid, all of these different things that you've kind of gone through. And then just recently, I mean, you went through another huge event while you were running, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, and so maybe you can tell people kind of what happened and kind of where are you with that journey?
Yeah, so it's like whenever anyone says to you, "Ever felt like you got hit by a truck?"
Well,
I'm
as a
like,
matter of fact,
actually, I wish the answer was no, but yes. It was May 3rd of 2020, so I'm coming up on a year. And I was out running with my husband, and it was like noon on a Sunday. So it was kind of an overcast day and, um, you know, just pretty quiet Sunday afternoon. And we were out on a run in our neighborhood, going to another neighborhood, and got to an intersection. There was a white Chevy Silverado in the right-hand turn lane that was stopped. So, sometimes you're approaching an intersection of cars coming to a rolling stop and you're like
yep.
much more aware. But when someone is stopped at an intersection and you have the solid white little person cross signal telling you to go and the light is red, you're like, all right, all signs say go here. And my husband ran across in front of me. We were maybe 10 feet apart, close enough to be talking. And I followed him. And all of a sudden, I was halfway. I was in the middle of the truck when he decided to take a right hand turn on red.
Mm.
And I just had nowhere to go. I had nowhere to go, and so I turned to face him to like slam my hands on the hood to be like, "Hot, like hello, person here. Light is red. What are you doing?" And he didn't. I don't know how, but he didn't see me right away, and so he kept going. And I don't know how far, 10 to 20 feet maybe that he drove, and then he realized there was a person on his on the front of in the hood of his car, and he stopped. And when he stopped, I slid off, and I landed really, really, really hard on like my feet, and kind of like a, you know,
Yeah,
and
like a jolting type
just
of.
like this jolting position. And then I stumbled backwards. There was a bit of a hill. I stumbled backwards, and I landed on like my elbow, my back, and all of a sudden I just started just wailing. I mean, I felt like I got the wind knocked out of me. I remember it happening in slow motion. I still have no idea what the driver looks like. I didn't see his face ever. My husband did, because he happened to turn around as it was happening, because he you can sense in your periphery if something's moving, and he could sense that it was moving. So he saw the whole thing. My husband saw the whole thing happen.
Wow.
And so I just was yelling, "Oh my God, I got hit, I got hit, I got hit." And then I was taken over to a sidewalk, just kind of like just hunched over. I mean, I was in so much pain. And then all of a sudden, all these people came out of nowhere, all had masks on, it's COVID. And someone's holding my hand, someone's, they're encouraging me. And then somebody called an ambulance. We didn't have our phones on us because we don't run with them. And so they come and they put me on a board and put one of those things on my neck, because whenever something's happening to someone's back, of course,
Yeah,
they
they
have to
stabilize you.
they stabilize. And then I got taken to a trauma room at a nearby hospital. I was there for 9 hours, and found out I had a compression fracture in my back. And it's really hard when a radiologist with kind of minimal bedside manner comes into a room full of blinking lights where you've been lying for 2 hours, still having this thing on your neck, with no one can come visit you because of COVID,
Yeah.
and says, "So there is a fracture in your back," and I just started crying, because I'm like, you automatically think in those situations, worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Like, what
Yeah.
is this? What does this mean? Like, I knew I could feel my leg. Like, I knew I had, that was all good signs.
Feeling
I could
still in the
feel
legs. Yeah. Yeah.
feeling in my leg. Like, I could feel, then they'd put me on a bunch of pain meds, obviously. So I'm sure I wasn't fully aware of the pain.
Yeah.
But I was just so devastated. And then I was like, oh my God, I need surgery. Like, oh my gosh, like, am I going to need surgery? Am I going to
Yeah.
stay here? What? And he's like, well, we have to do an x-ray and figure out. And so, other things that are going on. And so eventually, I had people coming in and out of the room all day. And there was this godsend, this woman named Ashley Simpson, like Jessica Simpson's sister. But, she came in and she saw a little after the radiologist came in, and I was crying, and she was like, kind of like, baby, what's going on? Just this really sweet kind of nurturing. And I was like, I have a fracture in my back. And she's like, oh, I forget exactly what she said, but something to the extent of like, oh, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. It's like the best kind of fracture, the best, because, non-displaced compression fracture. So, basically the bone just gets, scrunched.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she starts to tell me her story of how, when I had to relearn how to walk in my early 20s. And I was like, She had lesions on her brain, and didn't know. She had all these symptoms. She was, would be vomiting and like have all these things that were happening. Couldn't explain it. Her weight was fluctuating, and found out she had lesions on her brain that she had to have removed. And as a result of that, she had to relearn how to like walk normally. And she's telling me the story, and then she's telling me about how, shortly after getting out of that, I mean, she was, I think, in hospital, and for getting pretty intensive care for what sounded like about a year or so.
Yeah.
She finishes that a couple months later, is walking to her aunt's house, I think, for like a cookout, gets hit by a motorcyclist. I'm like, are you absolutely kidding me? So she ends up at the hospital. Nothing was broken. And she's like, I think this is a sign that maybe she had thought about going back to school. She's like, I think this is a sign that maybe I'm supposed to be doing something with medicine, because I keep ending up in hospitals. And so she's either physician's assistant or nurse practitioner. I realize those are very different. I think she's a PA in the neurology unit of this hospital now. So someone who's gone through her own neurological stuff. And then, so for her to say that, she's like, you're going to be okay. It was like, I find what I do in my work is to give people hope, is to be a catalyst for hope by sharing my own journey and inviting them to see, potentially possibility in their own. And just her saying that to me, like, I believed her. She had credibility in saying, you'll be okay. And she was such an encouragement. And that was, I see a somatic therapist who does mind body integration, helping me process the trauma of what happened. Because that was, I think I diminished the fact that, yes, getting hit by a truck and fracturing your back is traumatic.
Yeah.
In case you weren't, aware, Rachel. And she asked me at one point, when did you know you were going to be okay? When did you know you were okay? And I said, when Ashley had that conversation with me. That was my first glimmer of hope.
It really is powerful, the messages that people have and that people can give us. And so, while not nearly as traumatic, but I had a hip replacement, and from running, because it turns out I had arthritic hips. And after my mom passed, I decided that I was going to run a half marathon. And so I was the guy in football that would have to run my 2 mile time trial during the middle of double sessions because I could never make it. And so I was that guy. And here I am deciding that I'm going to run a half marathon. And I did it, but this was back when I was just unhealthy, and I was starting that journey, and I completely just damaged my leg from bad running and not being, not having the strength to do that. But my buddy, who was a physician's assistant at the orthopedic place that I went to, told me, he said, listen, you're young, and there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to do this in one day. He's like, you can go home from this. You don't have to stay overnight. And I was like, really, Hank? And he was just like, 100%. And so that whole day, I was just like, I'm going home. And I was like, I'm going to do whatever I need to so that I can go home, because I would just rather be at home. And I went in at 4 a.m. and I left at 4 p.m.
Wow.
And then the next day he says to me, you're still using the walker? And I was like, Hank, I just had a hip replacement. And he's like, but there is nothing that happened that is holding you back from being able to stand up on your own. Because, now that the hip had, the ball was cut, and I had that new hip in there, I had everything. They don't cut any muscles. They don't do any of that. So it was just like, he's like, you can do this. And so I was like, let me try it. And I did it. And it's amazing what people give us, that hope. They give us this idea of being able to do something that we put our own self-limiting thoughts on, because it's like we take other people's opinions and we take other people's thoughts and we take other people's kind of reactions and we bring them into our worlds, and we don't, kind of allow ourselves to just do what we can, or to speak our truths and to do all of the stuff that is just, natural for us.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess as I'm hearing you say that, I would encourage anyone who's listening right now to think of who is someone who has given you hope.
Yeah.
And have you expressed appreciation? Like, I'm going to write Ashley a note. It might even be for the 1 year, I don't know, send flower. I want to do something, but just send her something to let her know that her words were like medicine to me that day, that really soothed my soul in a way that I don't know what else could have.
Well, because if you think about it, right, like everything happens when we change our mindset. And so, if we only think about this, then that's exactly what's going to happen. So the fact that she was able to help you with that mindset, which is now what you give to other people, right? But it's that exploration of something different that allows them to see themselves differently and to do things differently. And so it's wonderful when somebody can make that impact for you.
Well, yeah, and the cool thing is too with this, I mean, I know you had someone on the podcast previously talking about grief, and I've done a lot of just exploring more of that work and that process and incorporating that into the work that I do now, letting people know, hey, what's been happening in the past year? There's been a grief process. There's been shock and denial and frustration and sadness and acceptance, maybe, but not for many. And the sixth lesser known stage of grief, according to David Kessler, is meaning making. And so I remember laying in the hospital bed, thinking to myself, there is something here about, I don't know if this is some sick thing that speakers do whenever something bad happens. You're like, I use this. This is material. This is material. Like, this is how we think. It's really messed up. But I remember having the thought in the hospital, there's something here about rising up when we get knocked down, and I'm going to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I do a keynote called I'm Still Standing, Rising Up with Resilience When Life Knocks You Down. So I'm like, the heck with you, Chevy Silverado. I'm going to find a way to use this. And so, whether that means singing Rise Up, or singing I'm Still Standing, or singing other things like that in the workshops and keynotes that I do as a way to connect. And for me, I lost basically all of the forms of stress outlets when that happened.
I was going to ask you because I can only imagine, as somebody who exercises on a regular basis, not only for my physical health, but for my mental health.
Yes.
I'm really curious as to how this last year has been for you because, I'm even sure with that fracture,
Yes.
is running an option for you? Because it sounds like it was something that you did
Yeah.
that is how will that fitness look like for you in the future?
Well, I mean, initially I couldn't bend, lift, or twist or do any load bearing or anything. I mean, I like for at least, I mean, I really didn't get cleared until August. The injury happened the first week of May. So that was like my summer, basically.
Yeah.
I could walk. I could walk and I could go to physical therapy. And that was what I could do because the fracture had to be stabilized. The bone had to fill in. Like I couldn't do
And you must
anything.
have had just such anxiety over COVID, not only having to do all of this, but then then you throw COVID and it's just like, I don't really want to go anywhere. Like, I don't want to be exposed to all of these
Yeah.
different things and so a
Yeah.
lot of people hibernate, because it's like, I didn't want to,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I was in doctor's office. I was in a back brace for 2 months, just to stabilize it because I couldn't. I mean, I was really, kind of
yeah.
very vulnerable, especially those first 2 months. And so I have an amazing physical therapist, and he was so encouraging. I remember the first day I saw him. It was in late June when I got cleared to go to physical therapy, and he said, "All right, take the back brace off." And I was like, "Ugh, I'm so scared. And then he's like, all right, I want you to bend. I want you to bend, like just bend over. Let me see you bend at your back. And so what it looked like, and it folks may be able to see this, but I basically bent at my hips. I bent at my
Oh,
hips, and he's like, no, like bend your, and I was like, ain't happening. That's not. And at one point he said, "Oh, okay, show me how you get up off the floor." And I was like, oh, I don't. I just,
yeah.
I'm always in a chair or something that I can get up from. I don't get up from the floor. And he goes, "Whoa, we're going to fix that today." And I remember how terrified I was of like, no, 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 no. Like I was so, I mean, your back, like this is the core, your spinal cord is like your
Yeah.
lifeline in your body. And anything that traumatizes that area, talk about setting
It's
off fight or flight in your brain. Oh my gosh.
100%. I can only imagine being like, I don't want to do this because I don't want to damage
Yes.
anything. And that's how I felt with my hip. It's just like, we don't know like, I can't do any of that. And it's just like, oh, you can do so much. You
Yeah.
have no idea.
Yes.
But we protect ourselves,
We do, and
right?
that's what it was. It was that I'm protecting, I'm protecting, I'm protecting. And so, and I was really reactive. Like symptom of PTSD can be like when you hear something drop, you hear loud noises that you're super reactive. And
Hmm.
so, it took me a while. I didn't start driving again until late August. But through physical therapy, got more and more comfortable and then got cleared, but I am just now being like basically graduating from physical therapy.
Mm.
I need to test some things from a running perspective. I thought it was some damage, a little bit of damage to my left ankle because of how I landed. And there was like an edema, there's swelling and stuff. And the way he said, you're going to have like, premature osteoarthritis in that ankle
Uh,
because of this injury. So I would recommend low to no impact stuff, which was a blow because I like running. My husband and I love to hike.
hmm
So I've been on a treadmill of physical therapy, but it's like 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off. So I'm going to go there and see, hey, what can I do?
hmm
How far can I go before there's pain? So I do need to still test that a bit.
hmm
And again, this is a year later. I'm just testing this.
Yeah.
But we got a Peloton in February because I was like, no impact.
I have to do something. Yeah.
And so I like sweat for the first time I had a workout for the first time in like 10 months in February. And I was like, oh, like just to be able to sweat, something I took
Hmm.
for granted before has
Yeah.
been like a joy. And just to be able to move my body and to feel strength in my legs and to be able to just, kind of go all out,
Hmm.
relatively speaking, it's such a gift that for
It
anyone
really
listening,
is.
if you've been maybe holding back. I don't really feel like let this be a nudge for you. If you are capable of moving your body, like if you don't have any limitations,
Hmm.
that you would like run for us today, like
Hmm.
go for a hike for us today, get on a bike for us today, like for anybody that maybe can't do what they want to do the way they want to do it,
Yeah.
like to recognize what a gift it is.
It really is. And, for me, I searched and I do a lot of biking, and I found a lot of fun in that. But what has helped me, I started to enjoy running for kind of getting lost in this space and just, kind of going out for like an hour or an hour and a half and listening to either music or getting lost in my thoughts or thinking about things. And I found that with indoor rowing
Oh.
through working out. I had used like an indoor, like a concept two rower, and I never really enjoyed it, but then I started to like it. But now when COVID came, my wife and I were working out at home and brought meditation, and I had wanted some meditation, and I finally kind of brought that into my practice. But I was still looking for something kind of like running, even though I'm not going to run anymore. And rowing was that thing because it was like a nice full body workout. You use all the muscles, and I could sit on the rower for an hour and kind of get lost in thoughts. I could think about, and that's really my time
Mm.
mentally, physically. I think about a podcast and I write notes. I get it, so it's just
Yeah.
it's a fun place to be, but it might be a nice potential thing to as an alternative, right? Because sometimes it's nice to have some options and stuff like that. But
And upper body stuff too, right? I mean, like aside from
exactly.
weights, you're not going to get whole upper body stuff on a bike.
Well, and that's the fun thing with the rower is that it really does work everything.
Mm.
And so it's been a lot of fun.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. And so how was it, you've been, it seems like almost all of your life so far, you have been dealing with lots of different adversity. And I think that people need to understand that really we all deal with adversity and grief, and some of us more than others, some of us at different times, but we don't get through life without dealing with something, without going through setbacks, without going through adversities.
Yeah.
And you being able to share your story and help people in this way is really impactful. What's the what's the one thing that, when you kind of take a look at all of this, that you're most proud of?
Mm. I would say that I am most proud of my ability to take. I remember I heard this said by Robin Roberts, the ABC anchor years ago, Good Morning America.
Yeah. Yep.
Said, make your mess your message.
Mm.
And that is
I like that. Yeah.
that's what I do. I take everything that at one point or another was a mess and I try to find meaning in it.
Yeah.
And I try to share what I've learned in it. And whether it's in my marriage, and that could be a whole other podcast conversation of things my
Yeah.
husband and I have done to really grow and make our marriage really healthy, and
Hmm.
or whether it's in my physical body, or whether it's seeing a somatic therapist who integrates mind and body and helps me process the emotion and the psychological weight and of this experience, or whether it's finding functional medicine doctors and then making that part of my mission to let people know that there are practitioners that will listen to you and treat you as a person and not a set of symptoms.
Hmm.
And or whether it's me finding my voice and then that somebody sees me singing on LinkedIn and then says, "Oh, seeing you sing gave me the courage to share a video of me dancing because I love to dance." And then that got me clients because they saw the authenticity in me. So for me, it's taking all of these things that have been challenges and turning them into something that can give another person hope.
Yeah. I love that. And it's special. And it really, and it almost feels a little selfish, right? Like, you know, you're giving all of these amazing things to people, and it's just like, I still get paid for this, but it feels so good, and it should. And it's great for people to be able to come away from an experience and to see a different version of themselves, because um, we all have a shining star, and it's just a matter of discovering it, developing it, and then giving that back to the world. Oh, I love that.
I have this at my desk. I have a little like foam star.
Stop it right now. That is fantastic. I have to get myself one of those because I say that all the time. Like, I never used to like think that I was special
Yeah.
until I understood that I was special. And
Mhm.
that's really what it's all about, is that we're all special. We all have something unique to be able to, give to the world. That
Yeah.
is fantastic. I love that.
Well, I didn't know this today. I wore my choose to shine
I,
shirt too.
yeah, I was going to ask you if that was the shining. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
excellent.
it's one of them. So how about that? That's a nice bow, huh? That's a nice
It,
unplanned bow.
it really is. It really is fantastic. Recovery and the mental part of all of what you did, because, while we really didn't talk about that, that's a huge part of, I'm sure, kind of growing up and always kind of dealing with that. So
Yeah,
I would love to potentially explore that
happy to.
at a later date, because I think that that's a pretty powerful thing, which only helps you do what you do even more because of having to deal with that kind of growing up and dealing with the situations that you get put in. Because I would imagine last year was a tough year, but you still seem pretty positive, and so
Well,
that's,
it was my best year ever in business, and that was my first full year of being in business for myself. I
oh,
launched my
congratulations.
business,
Yeah.
in September 2019, and then COVID hit in March, and I was 100% live speaking engagements. I had to pivot my entire business, and then 6 weeks later, I got hit by a pickup truck. So, like that wasn't in the plan that I had, but
No
apparently
kidding.
it was the plan. And this year's
Well, and
shaping me
even just
better.
having to pivot with your business with COVID
Yeah,
is a huge pivot.
yeah,
But then having to then deal with, getting hit by a truck,
yeah.
uh, is wild.
It's
Um,
something. It's something. But it's like I'm gonna use it. I'm gonna use it. Right. It wasn't necessarily something that I was planning to have happen, but
mhm.
I'm not gonna waste it. I'm not gonna waste it.
Yeah.
There's something in there. I'm gonna let myself grieve it. I'm gonna let myself feel it. I'm gonna cry a lot. I cried a lot last year. A lot, a
Oh,
lot, a lot. I was
yeah.
angry.
Hmm.
I was frustrated. I was discouraged. I was disappointed. I was all of those things. And I let myself be all of those things.
Hmm.
And I was like, I am not going to be a victim of this. And I am not going to let this defeat me.
Yeah. And did you find at some point, maybe it's now, where, you know, you're able to get to gratitude regardless of the
Oh, yeah.
situation,
Oh,
just
yeah.
being grateful for just all of the little things that have allowed these things to kind of come into your life, regardless of the situations, because bad things happen regardless. It's not anything, just bad things happen.
Yeah.
And but what I found, especially when I was taking care of my mom, I went through all of those stages, from resentment and frustration and anger and all of that stuff. But when I found gratitude, that was really what changed my life. Because regardless of what I was going through, I was just grateful to give that experience to my mom and give
Yeah.
that comfort to my mom, and that care. And so when people can find gratitude in bad situations, that's the most powerful thing that they can do for themselves, because it really helps mentally, kind of where you're going to get to.
Yeah. I think so. And I think we can maybe we'll close on that thought
Yeah, I think that it's a,
of just I found gratitude in the therapist that I see. I wouldn't have had any reason to find her if I didn't need to find somebody that does what she does. The gratitude I have for all the people who showed up, who supported and encouraged me. Gratitude for all the people who have now contacted me to say that seeing my journey and hearing what I've done with it has inspired them in some way. Seeing the support and the love of my husband, who has been so incredibly selfless through this
yeah,
experience, and just being there for me and being present, and the doctors that have been patient and helped me heal. I mean, I have immense gratitude for all of that. I think we can look back at things and say, gosh, I wish my body was as intact as it was on May 2nd of 2020.
hmm, hmm,
And the reality is I can accept that that happened, and I can choose to do something with it. So
yeah. I love that, Rachel. And listen, you are a shining star, and continue to be that shining star for others, you know, allowing that to be able to be brought out, for them. And so thank you for all that you do. Thank you for sharing your story with me. I'm extremely grateful for that. It's been a great hour, and I look forward to another conversation, because this was excellent.
I'm in. Thanks so much, Scott. Really appreciate it.
Excellent. Thank you.